In the year 1990, Nigel, the Dark Destroyer Benn, took on Chris, simply the best Eubank, in an epic British boxing middleweight showdown, which saw Chris, simply the best Eubank, win by 9th round TKO. Then after his defeat and coming off a 10-fight winning streak, you saw Nigel, the Dark Destroyer Benn, once again take on Chris, simply the best Eubank, in an epic boxing showdown where he pushed simply the best Eubanks to his absolute limit and ended up inking out a split decision draw. Now, almost 30 years later, you see their offspring, Conor the Destroyer Benn versus Chris Eubank Jr. come into the ring and battle out in front of thousands of British fans who are foaming at the mouth for a very nostalgic, epic British boxing showdown. And I am here today to tell you exactly why. This fight isn't gonna happen because Conor Benn failed a drug test, so let's talk about it. What's up, y'all? It's me, Average Josh, from the Average Josh Podcast, back with another video. Also, I'm at about 150 subscribers, so go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you like the content. Let's get that number up. I'm trying to get to maybe like 200 or so by the end of the month, but we'll see how that goes. But anyways, let's talk about this Conor Benn versus Chris Eubank Jr. fight. Now, if you haven't seen my previous video on there titled, this fight shouldn't happen, I already basically gave my opinion about why I didn't think the Conor Benn versus Chris Eubank Jr. fight should happen. And just to save you a trouble, you could definitely go back and watch that. It's a very nice video, detailed, far better edited than this one. But basically, it was just because I wanted Conor Benn and Chris Eubank to face better challenges. I wasn't wrapped up into the nostalgic hype that them and their fathers had built up in their previous fights. So I wanted to see Conor Benn kind of like fight somebody like Speedy Rashidi Ellis, then move up, get more experience, and then essentially maybe one day ended up fighting someone like Virgil Ortiz or Jaron Ennis or Keith Thurman or Spence or Crawford, just someone like that. And I wanted to see, Chris Eubank get that rematch of Billy Joe Saunders if that was possible, or maybe fight Charlo, or just have another big fight that's within their weight classes. Essentially, I didn't care about that fight just because they weren't in the same weight class. Now, when I did sit down and I did watch their dad's fights, as research for that video, I definitely understood why so many British boxing fans wanted that fight, because it was fantastic. So it kind of gave me those vibes. You ever watch like an action movie or a Bruce Lee movie, and then once you get out of the movie theater, you just feel like going to beat somebody's ass? It kind of gave me those vibes. So imagine being their sons, right? And you're watching your dad in this war against another man, and you're already a boxer, so it just gets you filled up with all this like wanting to beat someone's ass, type of energy. So then when you basically you have the opportunity to kind of continue that, and in Conor Benn's case, avenge a loss that he must have watched maybe 100 times when he was a kid, once he got into his dad's tapes or whatever. But sadly, that's not what happened. What ended up happening was Conor Benn ended up testing positive for some type of fertility drug, which doubles as a testosterone booster, which is a performance enhancing drug. So basically the fight's completely off. Now, I know after I posted that video, a bunch of the British boxing fans, they came into the comment section. Most of them, they were actually agreeing with my side, but a lot of them didn't. They did have valid points, which I thought the most valid point was just simply that the British boxing fans, just like the American boxing fans, they do not get a lot of the fights that they want. So even though that this is a fight that's basically built on nostalgia, not built on practicality, because the weight classes are just way too different, they wanted that fight for the nostalgic reasons, and they wanted that fight because they were a fan of the fathers and they were a fan of the sons, and they just wanted to see it. And I think that that's a good enough reason to want the fight. it's a good enough reason. They probably don't care about my perspective, that I just want them to fight other American fighters that are better, both of them, so that we can have that British versus America showdown. You know, kind of like the Tyson Fury versus Wilder, or Anthony Joshua versus Andy Ruiz, or Kell Brook versus Errol Spence, just things like that. But I can understand why they wanted, especially after seeing those last two fights, because the fights between the Dark Destroyer and Simply the Best, they were fantastic. They were. There's no way around it. They were fantastic. But when Conor Benn tested positive, I don't want to throw Conor Benn completely under the bus, because at the end of the day, it could have been a false positive. They haven't had the B sample yet. It could have been something that was maybe in his drink, like kind of like Oscar Valdez says herbal tea, or Canelo Alvarez with the tainted Mexican meat, or Tyson Fury with the boar meat, or just whatever. You know, you see things like this all the time, and typically it gets swept under the rug. Now, should it be swept under the rug? In my opinion, absolutely not, because you already have two people who are coming into a fight, right? In a sport that's extremely dangerous, and then you're making it more dangerous and just more dirty by adding performance enhancing drugs into the mix, which shouldn't be tolerated at all. But like I said, I don't have all the information about it. I don't know everything about it, so I'm not just going to jump out the window and throw Conor Benn completely under the bus. But if it is true, and if he did indeed cheat, he definitely needs to be reprimanded to the fullest extent of you know, whatever governing bodies govern British boxing. It shouldn't, because like I said, typically in boxing, performance enhancing drugs get swept under the rug. The only time they don't typically get swept under the rug is when they fall into the mainstream. And then when they fall into the mainstream, it just depends on if the outrage is greater than the support for the fighter. Like with Canelo Alvarez, it did start flowing into the mainstream, but the support for the fighter, because he has a huge Mexican fan base in America, it was overwhelming support versus only a little bit of negative action. And typically the only time boxers really get in trouble about that stuff is if there's so much negative feedback from casual fans that it just causes it to be a disruption to the money. Because right now, Eddie Hearn already tried to sweep it under the rug. He was like, all right, we're just going to get this fight going. You know, we're just going to get the fight going. It doesn't matter. They just want to make their money. People have already bought their tickets. People have already booked their flights. People have already booked their hotel. The venue was already booked. The advertisers, the vendors, everything was already booked. So they're just trying to make their money. They don't care about the sport. Like I said, the sport is basically just a whore that they pimp out for money. It just is what it is. But to the fans, it's different, because there are so many fans, whether you were rooting for Conor Benn or you were going against Conor Benn, or you're someone like me who just wanted to make sure that both fighters were okay, whether it be from Conor Benn fighting a bigger man and possibly getting really hurt, or whether it be for Chris Eubank Jr. basically losing all that weight and putting his body through all that and not messing up his body by doing so and dropping down so low. Not because I'm like some soft dude who just really cares so much about these dudes' health. It's not like I want them to die or anything, but it's a blood sport. It is what it is. I enjoy violence. You enjoy violence. That's why you're watching this channel. We all enjoy violence. You know, are you not entertained? But I just wanted them to make better fights down the line. But I think the biggest loser besides the boxing fans is Chris Eubank Jr. Because his own father didn't want him to take this fight, because he knew what he was pushing himself to do. He's been in training camp for weeks and weeks, and he's been dieting for weeks and weeks to get down to this weight to be able to perform on that day. And honestly, part of the reasons why I thought he was just gonna wash Conor Benn was because I fully expected him to maybe not make weight and just take the consequences of not making weight, and then rehydrate and just take the consequences of rehydrating, which would be financial consequences. And because the dude was born rich and he's most likely to die rich, I don't think he was too worried about the financial consequences. But it does seem like from the amount of effort he was putting in to lose the weight and the amount of effort he was putting in the training camp, that he was taking the fight very seriously. He wasn't gonna do like Shakur Stevenson did and come in overweight. And I have to give him, props for fair play, because he was very much doing fair play. And I think that's why this is just so unfair. He put himself through all of that, and is ready to fight, and then it just gets ended because Conor Benn popped dirty. So now you have and I think his father was super worried about it. Like, I'm not familiar with the news of British boxing, but from what I heard, it did seem like Chris Eubank Jr. was extremely worried about that. Even talking about the son who he had lost from, I think he had some type of undiagnosed heart condition and passed away. He was even bringing that up in a tweet. I remember that as well. So yeah, it's just an all-around unfortunate situation. And honestly, I don't think that if it is true and they do find out that the B sample tests positive as well, it's not something that's going to be swept under the rug, because it's too big to be swept under the rug. It's going to be like, it's like sweeping an elephant under the rug. If it was someone like when, who was it, Oscar Rivas and Dillian White fought, wasn't a huge fight. Not a huge fight, you know what I'm saying? So it didn't get the casual boxing fans involved in it to the point where it made the organization look so bad that the real government bodies were going to start looking into it, messing up their money, so they actually had to do anything. But because there's the history with Conor Benn's father and Chris Eubank Jr.'s father, and it was a big fight in the UK, you're going to start hearing people talk about this that normally wouldn't talk about it or even care about it, just because it's reaching a level of news within the UK that reaches like celebrity status. Like if someone like Mbappe or Cristiano Ronaldo did something, or if LeBron James cheated on his wife, it'll probably reach over there or something like that. Just a scandal like that. It just goes beyond the scope of boxing. You know what I mean? But so it's not going to get swept under the rug. But we'll see. We'll see how things go. We'll see how the B sample goes. We see how the investigation into it goes. But like I said, it can't be swept under the rug because it's just too big at this point. It's too big. There was too many factors. Like if it was just Conor Benn versus Chris Algieri or someone like that who's less popular and nobody was really too checking on the fight, they could easily give Conor Benn a small suspension or just have the fight go on and no one would even talk about it. No one would even care. Just like when Oscar Valdez tested positive when he was fighting Robson Corsaccio in the United States, and they just let the fight go on. And they just moved the goalposts and they say, well, even though it's a banned substance, we don't consider this a banned substance, you know, which Eddie Hearn was trying to do. But like I said, it's just too big. Like the fight was too big in the UK for them to be able to do that. And the people who liked Conor Benn are highly disappointed. And the people who didn't like him have actual reason not to like him now. So it's just all around not good, and he's gonna have to hold that L if he did intentionally cheat, and he's gonna have to be reprimanded for it. And I don't think Eddie Hearn could wiggle out of this, because if he tries to wiggle out of it, especially with all the stuff that's going on in UK boxing, like Daniel Canahan and stuff, and I'm not saying it's like American boxing is better, because all boxing is corrupt all across the world. I'd probably say that Japan probably has the cleanest boxing program, and even theirs is somewhat corrupt. But yeah, even with all of that, it's just like it's just too big. He knows that if he tries to sweep this under the rug, if he doesn't like properly investigate it into it, then the authorities are gonna start investigating into his programs and his affairs and his fighters, and that's just gonna have to spend more money on legal teams and more money on like PR and stuff. So they're gonna have to reprimand Conor Benn if he fails that B sample, or they're gonna have to freaking really twist the narrative and maybe get Chris Eubank Jr. to kind of look out for Conor Benn and say, oh, he's not a cheater and stuff like that, to get it to go away, because it's a story with so much history that the news outlets can definitely make money off of it. So they're going to keep pushing it in the news. And that's going to make it bigger, and it's going to make people look bad. And when people look bad, people start getting outraged, and the outrage is going to turn into an investigation, and the investigation is going to turn into loss of profit. And all these slimy promoters and these people in boxing, with the exception of like most of the fighters, all they care about is profit. So it's going to mess up the money, so they're going to have to do something about it. But we'll see. But I honestly expect Conor Benn to be reprimanded. Like, I don't think there's any way around it. But that's all I got to say about that. I'm out.